I think the biggest takeaway from this episode is that we learned that Cortana likes to watch. Hello, interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to my review of Halo the series, Episode 8, Allegiance. So after last week's episode that I was really kind of down on, mostly because of its singular focus on Quan, who I don't hate as a character, but I've just found her to be superfluous, it was nice to get back to a storyline that I actually care a lot more about, and I thought that this episode was a nice progression of all the stuff that's basically been building up for the last 3 or 4 episodes, mainly to do with Halsey, McKee, and John specifically. And I thought it paid them off fairly well, though some of these storylines, namely the relationship between John and McKee, are fairly cliche, I guess would probably be the right word to use. It's not badly done, but the storyline of a person who is radicalized one way, but then almost just might be turned to the good side because of their love of the main character, but then being mistreated by the same people that main character stands up for, and thereby turning all the way to evil. I've seen that done a bunch of different times in media, so I wasn't particularly shocked by the direction McKee took in this episode, basically falling in love with John and then being like, oh, maybe I'll turn away from the Covenant, and then you knew that, like, Halsey or some people were going to show some sort of antagonism to her, which is going to turn her evil again. It was all kind of fairly, like, by the numbers, connect the dots sort of storytelling, and while not badly done overall, I'm kind of glad that we got through most of it within a single episode rather than, like, extending it out over the course of several episodes, because you knew that that was ultimately going to be where it's going to go. However, what I will say, while I did anticipate that storyline, I will say there are some things about this version of it that I think made it at least fairly effective within how we've seen these characters characterized, if I may use that as a phrase. Because I really loved that John made the explicit connection at one point between her sort of coming to his side of things and sort of being deprogrammed from her Covenant indoctrination to his own deprogramming, his own indoctrination done by Halsey. I love that he explicitly made that connection, and it made me go like, oh, that makes perfect sense then why these two would sort of be drawn together so quickly, especially since they are the first human beings really that they've had any sort of emotional connection with. Like, John has really not emotionally connected with anybody because he's been taught to not really have an emotional connection with anybody. And then McKee really hasn't been with any humans generally, so I doubt she's like finding emotional connection with the Shang-Healy. So this was like nice to see, like, oh, they would probably fall for each other very quickly because of the situations that they've been in and their connection to each other based on their similar experiences. So while it is a bit rushed and a bit quick, it made sense to me, especially with the visuals in this episode. And I want to especially call out the cinematography and the visuals throughout this episode because I thought they did such a wonderful job of subtly implying the connection between John and McKee. Like the opening shots where John's looking in the mirror and drawing a halo, cut to McKee with her looking in the circular mirror, which also evokes Halo and that connection as well. I thought it was just a really great visual signifier, and then when they're tracing each other's scars also made a lot of sense as well, and it brings us a nice reminder to when McKee sort of gets turned evil again at the end of the episode because of the same sort of weapon that she got hit when she was a kid. So all of that was just very well visually evoked, and I generally enjoyed all of it. Also, another good visual distinguisher was the fact that, and it was fairly gnarly too, by the way, that McKee takes out her fingernail thing. Like, that was pretty hard to watch, I'll be quite frank with you. It's pretty ghastly. But I like that that was a similar evocation of John taking out his emotional inhibitor chip from earlier on in the season. And it showcases, again, like in a subtle way, her going through the same sort of thing that John went through. And I just like those like subtle parallels between the two characters. And I thought, again, just well thought out sort of narrative juxtaposition with these two that I thought just worked well. But moving on from John and McKee, some other things that worked really well for me in this episode, Kai being freaking badass just all around. I love Kai so much in this show. Just her like pulling up a warthog and like doing bets with the other soldiers just reads so well for her character. I love that. But then when the other Spartans get turned by Halsey and they sort of lock her up, and she's tied to that bench, using her freaking feet to kick off the bench was so badass. I loved it. Kai, just, while she didn't get a ton to do this episode, every single scene she's in, I'm just like, she's the best, easily my favorite character of the show. A couple of the small things too is I did like that we started to get a little bit more of the Covenant attacking humanity here, because they've been kind of a sideline threat throughout most of the show, just being things that swoop in and attack every once in a while, like in I think episodes 5 or 6. But here, finally, we're starting to get more of a sense of their ideology and menace through McKee and also through their attacking the human colony. And we also get reference to the Cole Protocol, which was a cool little Easter egg. For those of you who don't know what the Cole Protocol is from the games and novels, it is the protocol that basically any humans captured by the Covenant or any ships captured by the Covenant have to wipe their data so that the Covenant can't find the location of Earth, sort of hiding it from the Covenant so that they can't find humans' homeworld. So I like that little Easter egg and reference there by Captain Keyes as well. But this does bring us finally to Halsey, who I'm glad finally made her move in this episode, calling in the Zed protocol with the Spartans in order to have them do work for her in order to capture John and stop McKee from getting to the artifact. This has been building for a while. We kind of figured that this would eventually happen, that Halsey would make her move. So I'm liking that it's happening before the finale, because we do have a little bit more to build from there. And I thought all of it was just really well intriguing, and the fact that Cortana had slowly started to feel more emotion for John and connection to John, and ultimately betraying Halsey. And I loved seeing in the final fight sequence between John and the other Spartans that she was working with him, and it felt like very Halo-esque, like she's calling out the rope, she's calling out the Warthog, like turning the Warthog on for him. All of that was just really nice, and I like seeing that sort of evocation of what the video games do with her character. Just really, honestly, this show, throughout all of these things, is continually showing me this might be one of my favorite live-action video game adaptations done so far. It's taken a while to build to that, but it's gotten there, and I'm just really in shock about how over 8 episodes this show, while it's had some downs, mainly with the Quan stuff, has generally just become a really solid sci-fi tale, and I'm honestly just enjoying every beat of it so far. Even if it's not the best science fiction show I've ever seen, it is a very solid one, and I'm just liking it. And on that note, speaking of Halsey, I just also liked the several different moments that we got with her character, how she saw love as weakness, how she sort of pushed Captain Keyes away, and Keyes going to Miranda and showing love for her, sort of paralleling Halsey's coldness and how she doesn't understand these different romantic relationships or any sort of attachment, and her being willing to manipulate that, such as with McKee to get her to work with John against humanity just in general. Like, it was all just well characterized for her. So on the whole, this has been great. I am just really enjoying the show, and it continues to impress me. While we had it down last week, this was definitely back on the up. So yeah, Halo, doing great, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Did you like this show? Also, don't forget my Star Trek Strange New Worlds Episode 2 review is out now as well, so check that out. But beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you, as always, my friends, live long and prosper.